welcome to today's Oil for the Journey oil change. I am your journey reader, Denise Joyner, and today's oil change will be a review of Nehemiah chapters 10 through the end, which is chapter 13. So first, a little historical backdrop. Nehemiah and Ezra, those two books, Ezra precedes Nehemiah, is actually one book in the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. So those books are combined, and it's largely combined because they're contemporaries. Ezra was a priest during Nehemiah's time, and so they were basically around at the same time, and their stories in both books coincide and mesh together quite well. Another thing is what's mentioned throughout this book, and I forgot which chapter, but what's mentioned throughout this book is the book of the Annals. Now, Annals were a record, Annals and Steels. It's also mentioned in the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Annals. These were records of kings or leaders of Israel, and even foreign leaders of that time if they were in exile. And basically it just records events, significant events that occurred. So it's interesting to note that the book of Nehemiah, or events in Nehemiah's time, were also recorded in annals of the Persian Empire, the Arabs. And remember, Persia, I think it was in the 60s, 1960s, changed its name from Persia to Iran. So we're looking at the Middle East and that whole area. The borders may be very different, not maybe, they are very different than they are today, but just to get a sense of the geographic location we're referring to in this text. And so they journey from what we know today as Iran and that vicinity over westward to Jerusalem, and Nehemiah gets favor from the king to go back and to rebuild the Jerusalem temple after the Babylonians had destroyed the temple in, I would think, about 100 years before, around 560 or 580 BC. And here's Nehemiah in around 460 BC, and he's rebuilding this temple in honor of his God, Yahweh, and wanting to bring the people back to not only a physical place of worship, but a heart of worship, which takes us to chapters 10 through 13, where after the wall is rebuilt and Ezra reads the book of the law, the book of Moses, and dedicates the temple, and people recite words of commitment and rededication, then Nehemiah sets people in charge, just like old times, if you will, in the Old Testament, or earlier in the Old Testament. We're in the Old Testament still. And he basically lays down the orders and the directions as a leader for the gatekeepers, what their responsibilities were, who they were, the temple musicians, the ones that were responsible for keeping the storeroom where all the tithes came in, which were for the Levites, because the Levites basically didn't work a vocation outside of maintaining the temple grounds and maintaining the sacrifices for worship. So Nehemiah dutifully restores order and restores a place for worship for the Israelites, for the followers of Yahweh. However, interestingly enough, chapters 12 and 13 point out how they strayed away just that quick from the orders. They were starting to, they stored some of Tobiah's personal belongings in the storeroom, which was for the items for the Levites. There were sacred items, even the temple temple artifacts were also stored in this storeroom. And they had the nerve to put Tobiah, and remember Tobiah, along with Sanballat, earlier in the book of Nehemiah, conspired to fight against him and overthrow him and talk bad about Nehemiah. Basically, they were angry with him for rebuilding this temple wall. So they conspired against him, and then they had the nerve to bring Tobiah, who was still a leader, basically, and to come and store his things in a holy place, the holy storage room, if you will. And they were trading and selling things on the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was not to be a day of trade, it was to be a day of rest. They were just not abiding by the law of Moses, which was previously read to them earlier, and just that quickly they forgot and went back to their old ways. They were marrying foreign women, which they were warned not to do, especially Ammonites, Moabites, and they did all of this within probably a period of 2 years after the walls were rebuilt and order was established. And Nehemiah had probably went back to his role as cupbearer and then asked for more time to come back. So he was absent for maybe a period of 2 months with the back and forth round trip, and they just went crazy. So Nehemiah rebuked them for that and told the people, look, we built this temple, rebuilt this temple wall. We have protective gates. Remember the Lord your God. Learn from the mistakes of your ancestors in their sins and live holy lives for him. And this is what the heart of Nehemiah's leadership was. One of the reasons I love this book is because Nehemiah, there were times where he felt like probably the Lone Ranger, if you will, focused on bringing the people back to a place of worship. And remember, not a place physically, but a heart of worship, and faced tremendous opposition, only to do all of that, rebuild the temple gates, the walls of Jerusalem temple, and they turn away, or they forget so easily the Lord their God and all his statutes. And I'm sure it broke Nehemiah's heart. Moreover, it broke God's heart. So our takeaway here is just to be reminded that when we rededicate our hearts to God, you know, we have ups and downs in our walk, our Christian journey. It's a journey. But when we go back, we have to let go and relinquish all those things that were sinfully taking us away from God in the first place. And I believe someone needs to know today that in order to move forward in God, you got to let go of those things that were holding you back and away from God. And that's exactly what Nehemiah was trying to do, like a holy cleansing from people, from items, from events, situations. We need to clean those things out, make decisions earnestly to clean those things out of our lives, to return our hearts to a place of worship before our God, the Lord our God, Yahweh. So I hope this journey reading was an oil change, was not only informative but transformative for you, my brother and sisters in Christ. To God be the glory, and have a blessed day.